This is CBN NewsWatch.
And thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Wendy Griffith. In Washington, pressure is building as lawmakers race to find a way to provide aid for the humanitarian crisis on the border. The White House is warning that its money will run out in a matter of days, and lawmakers leave tomorrow for their July 4th recess. The Evangelical Immigration Table is one group that's pushing for this aid. Their leaders visited the border in El Paso last weekend and found that the president's new Remain in Mexico policy is sending thousands of immigrants back over the border. Heather Sells has the story.
For months, churches in El Paso have received hundreds of immigrants daily. But now all that is changing and their numbers have dropped drastically.
Since October, Border Patrol officers here have apprehended more than 120,000 adults and children, a more than 1,000% increase over the past year. Upon their release, churches here have tried to fill the gap. Tiny El Elyon, a neighborhood congregation, has cared for 70 people a night.
We used to do this every single day, 7 days a week.
Pastor Maribel showed us pictures of families as they arrived, received food, clothing, shelter, and prayer. Most usually stayed just one night, then caught a bus or flew out of the city to connect with family elsewhere.
I never realized how far this would go, but I was always depending on the Lord and saying, Lord, what do you want me to do? It's a multitude of people that need us.
Church leaders in El Paso believe President Trump's new Remain in Mexico policy is behind the drop in numbers. Not only do asylum seekers go back to wait on court dates, Mexican police also deter immigrants from crossing into Mexico or seeking to enter the U.S.
It's uncertain yet exactly why that is. Maybe they're being released somewhere else. Certainly more are being released back into Mexico, which is really going to be probably a lot more of a challenge.
This past week, leaders from the Evangelical Immigration Table came to hear from Border Patrol officers and tour one of the last church shelters still open in El Paso.
What we know about this situation is that it's fluid. It is changing all the time. Could shift back. We'll see what happens.
Sammy DePasquale, who leads a Christian community center here, says churches are pivoting to support their counterparts in the city of Juarez, Mexico. Evangelical leaders also visited a Methodist shelter in Juarez. While there's a growing coalition of evangelical churches here, it's not enough to care for the thousands of asylum seekers waiting on a U.S. hearing.
So they're waiting in Mexico, the shelters are full, they don't have authorization to work while they're in Mexico.
World Relief's Matt Soren says legal help, like his organization provides, is also difficult to find in Mexico. That could mean greater numbers will face deportation.
If they have a well-founded fear of persecution under the Refugee Act of 1980, they should be allowed to stay. But the burden is on them to prove that, and that can be a difficult thing to prove.
Pastor Maribel says El Elyon is ready to receive migrants again, should it be needed. And she won't forget the stories, courage, and faith of those she helped.
They're very humble people, hardworking people. They're people very loyal. Once you have the chance to sit down with one of them and listen, it will break your heart. It will break your heart. It will change your mind, the way that we think of them.
Experts say asylum courts in El Paso reject most cases, but for these desperate people, living in the U.S. remains a dream worth fighting for. Reporting in El Paso, Heather Sells, CBN News.
And Heather's with us now. Heather, this group, the Evangelical Immigration Table, who are they? First of all, and how are they involved in this border debate?
Right. They're low-key, but they're high-powered. And it's everyone from Southern Baptist Assemblies of God, World Relief, World Vision, Bethany Christian Services, a lot of really interesting and high-powered denominations and ministries.
Like the who's who.
Yes, and they are actively involved in Washington. They have been advocating for immigrants for a number of years now, but they just sent a letter to the president, to Speaker Pelosi and Leader McConnell today saying, please fund, we need to humanely provide for these children in detention.
So what's the latest on whether the lawmakers will be able to pass a border aid plan? I mean, tomorrow they leave for their July 4th recess. Do you think they'll get it done?
It is a stalemate right now. Leader McConnell is saying he's not going to accept the House amendments. The House is expected to vote this afternoon. But I think it's going to be interesting if they do not act today or tomorrow. How are they going to face their constituents, people seeing these images from the border? You know, I don't know, Wendy. No one really knows what's going to happen in the next 2 days.
Well, you were there. You saw it firsthand. You saw stuff that we are not even able to show. What's your sense of how urgently this border funding is needed?
Well, it's interesting because, of course, they did not, Border Patrol, Customs did not allow us into these processing centers, these detention facilities, and that's one of the issues. But I was with Border Patrol for an entire day, and they are, because they don't have enough funding, Border Patrol agents are the ones who are caring for these immigrants, and their stations are overflowing. And so from that perspective, I know that the money is urgently needed.
And in the church, I mean, that tiny church helping like 70 families.
Right. They are, what's happening is when ICE, Immigrations and Customs Enforcement finishes with these families, they drop them off at church shelters. And now, there's more of a burden on the Mexico churches. So we're going to put up a link for you. It's Amazon. And if people want to help fund these church shelters, they can go onto Amazon and buy diapers, underwear, food, you name it, and help these church shelters out.
Because let's face it, the government's not going to be able to do it all.
Absolutely.
They can never do it all in a crisis, and the churches are the ones. Thank you so much, Heather. Appreciate
You're welcome.
that. Well, Democratic presidential candidates squared off in their first debate Wednesday night in Miami. 10 of the candidates vied for the attention in the crowded race to take on President Trump. Charlene Aaron has a look at where some of the candidates stood on the issues like immigration, foreign policy, and abortion, as well as what to expect for tonight's debate. Charlene, this is getting pretty hot.
It is getting pretty hot, Wendy. The Democratic candidates took shots at each other on immigration and recent calls to decriminalize illegal border crossings. The issue of abortion and keeping Roe v. Wade also a major talking point. Take a look.
The reason that they're separating these little children from their families is that they're using Section 1325 of that act, which criminalizes coming across the border, to incarcerate the parents and then separate them. Some of us on this stage have called to end that section, to terminate it. Some, like Congressman O'Rourke, have not.
You're looking at just one small part of this. I'm talking about a comprehensive rewrite of our immigration laws.
If you did your homework on this issue, you would know.
I would make certain that every woman has access to the full range of reproductive health care services, and that includes birth control, it includes abortion, it includes everything for a woman.
And Tulsi Gabbard, one of the lesser-known candidates, caught the attention of many for her criticism of the Trump administration's actions on Iran.
This president and his chicken hawk cabinet have led us to the brink of war with Iran. I served in the war in Iraq at the height of the war in 2005. The American people need to understand that this war with Iran would be far more devastating.
And former Vice President Joe Biden will take the stage with top rival Bernie Sanders and 8 other candidates in the second debate tonight. CBN News political chief analyst David Brody says it will be interesting to see how many of the candidates will take on Biden, who is the early frontrunner.
There is a bit of Donald Trump, if you will, in that the chutzpah factor when it comes to Biden. I think we'll see that on stage tonight if he gets attacked. The question is, how much will he get attacked? I think Bernie Sanders is going to go after him a little bit. Kamala Harris might as well on the race issue. We'll have to wait and see.
And tonight's debate is set for 9 p.m. on NBC. Wendy?
We'll have to wait and see for sure. Thanks, Charlene. Well, the man the Democrats are hoping to replace President Trump arrived in Japan today for the annual Group of 20 summit. Leading topics on the agenda include tensions with Iran, climate change, and international trade disputes. China says it intends to defend itself against more U.S. moves to penalize it over trade practices. And Japan's prime minister wants to make this summit all about the environment, including climate change. And we'll have more on this story and others on Faith Nation this evening. You can watch it right here on the CBN News Channel. Well, a case of free speech stifled. Popular author and expert on Islam in the Middle East, Raymond Ibrahim, is the latest victim of politically correct speech on campus, this time at the U.S. Army War College. Ibrahim is the author of the book Sword and Scimitar, 14 centuries of war between Islam and the West. The college postponed his lecture after the Egyptian American was labeled an Islamophobe whose rhetoric would, quote, foster white nationalism and war crimes against Muslims in the military. On tonight's episode of The Global Lane, Ibrahim discusses how the Council on American-Islamic Relations and Empower Change convinced the taxpayer-funded institution to cancel his scheduled speech.
CARE sent out a hysterical screed in the guise of a press release. And also, Linda Sarsour, her group, Empower Change, she created this petition, even more hysterical. And so the long and short of these, the press release and the petition is that I, a man of 100% Egyptian ancestry and heritage, am a racist and a white nationalist, and that the U.S. Army already has a big problem with racism and white nationalism, and that if they go ahead with a talk, I am going to radicalize the American military to the point they're going to go out in the street and start killing Muslims.
Wow. Watch more of Raymond Ibrahim on The Global Lane. It's on the CBN News Channel. That's tonight at 9:30 Eastern. Coming up, how one of the country's largest black denominations is keeping up the pro-life fight in the black community.
Roman soldiers destroy the Second Temple of Jerusalem. Centuries of eyewitnesses say the temple treasures survived. But where are they?
They went from Jerusalem to Rome, Rome to Carthage, Carthage to Byzantium.
Historians are silent about what happened to it next.
This is a bad omen.
Hosted and narrated by Gordon Robertson.
So does it still exist today?
CBN Documentaries presents a story of mystery.
Where is it?
Calamity. Most of the victims were butchered. And destiny.
The possibility to dig is impossible.
Take a journey to find Treasures of the Second Temple, a CBN Documentaries presentation, coming July 8th.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
Abortion statistics in the black community are alarming, and many pro-life advocates believe that trend can be traced to the founder of what would become Planned Parenthood. More than 100 years ago, Margaret Sanger encouraged abortion and sterilization to limit the size of black families. For the most part, many African-American churches have been silent on abortion. Now, one of the country's largest black denominations is speaking out. Charlene Aaron has the story.
According to U.S. Census data, blacks make up only 13% of the U.S. population, yet more than 30% of aborted babies are from black mothers.
It is the #1 killer of all African Americans in the nation. You can add cancer, you can add AIDS, you can add car accidents, homicides, crime, shooting, name the gamut and put those together, and it will not equal the amount of lives that we lose to abortion.
It is an issue Charles Blake, the presiding bishop of the Church of God in Christ, also known as COGIC, has spoken out about in the past.
Black women, according to the statistics, are almost 4 times as likely to have an abortion as a white women. And almost 65 of those who have had abortions have never been married. You're killing a human being. It's a human being from the moment it's conceived.
With more than 6.5 million members worldwide, COGIC is working with the Pro-Life Human Coalition Network to help Black women choose life. They call it the Family Life Campaign, which challenges church members to personally take action in fighting for the unborn. COGIC members are encouraged to act in various ways, such as counseling outside abortion clinics or working with expectant mothers inside pregnancy centers. Campaign Vice President Leslie Monet says this mission is vital to the survival of both the Black family and the Black church.
We've placed this at the center of our missions department, where we are telling churches, hey, this is what we need to be grilling our children, our parishioners on. We need to make sure that they're pro-life. We need to make sure children are being taken care of in uterine and outside.
Monet says churches, specifically African-American churches, have been silent on abortion for far too long, which is why COGIC is stepping up to the plate.
I think one of the reasons is because we are afraid to confront that issue in our church, because we have been a part of that issue. There are 2 out of 4 women in church are post-abortive. And so I think it's a ruffling of feathers, a great taboo, a secret, darkness that people don't want to shed light on, but we must shed the light on this issue.
In the meantime, COGIC hopes other denominations will join in the fight to make abortion unthinkable and unavailable in the Black community and beyond. Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Still ahead, a human rights group uncovers hundreds of public execution sites in North Korea. We'll find out what's been happening there and get the story from a leading religious freedom advocate. Stay tuned.
Introducing the CBN Bible from CBN.com. Now, an easier way to study the Bible and grow in your faith. Highlight your favorite verse. Read separate versions at a glance. Click and read a commentary. Or cross-reference your favorite verse using the Strong's Concordance. All the right tools to study the Bible, all in one place. The CBN Bible, available at cbn.com/Bible or the iTunes App Store.
It has the power to influence weight loss, boost your immune system, and improve brain function.
We've seen an explosion of data on the role of the gut microbiome in health.
The free Build a Better Gut booklet reveals the latest information about the gut microbiome. You'll discover how your gut affects the rest of your health.
The gut microbiome has been linked to depression and cancer and heart disease.
Learn how to build a stronger, healthier gut.
The microbiome, if it's in good composition, are really protecting us all the time from more invasive things.
Get the Build a Better Gut booklet, free from the Christian Broadcasting Network. Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to cbn.com/buildabettergut.
You need to make sure that your microbes are working with you, not against you.
And if you order online, you'll get immediate access to the Build a Better Gut series, a digital copy of the booklet, and related bonus material. Build a Better Gut today. Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to cbn.com/buildabettergut for your free copy.
Here, we're committed to a heritage of rigorous scholarship dating back over 1,000 years.
And to a faith tradition dating back 1,000 more.
This is how we create a culture of inquiry where no topic is off limits.
And a culture of hope.
Anything's possible!
It's Christian leadership.
And it's changing the world for the better.
It's higher learning.
It's greater knowing.
It's what makes us whole.
It's what makes us Regent.
A South Korea-based group has uncovered more than 300 sites used by North Korea's regime to publicly execute its citizens. In this week's edition of World Beat, George Thomas speaks to a leading religious freedom advocate who is speaking out on behalf of North Korea's oppressed people.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to World Beat, where we show you what's happening in the world and how you can pray about it. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said the Trump administration is ready to resume talks with communist North Korea at a moment's notice if the regime signaled a willingness to discuss denuclearization of the peninsula. Talks between our two nations, by the way, stalled following Trump's second meeting with Kim Jong-un in Vietnam. Meanwhile, testimonies from more than 600 North Korean defectors claim the government routinely carries out public executions, often at riverbanks, markets, or in schools. The South Korea-based Transitional Justice Working Group released a map showing dozens of locations where North Koreans were reportedly publicly executed for crimes related to theft, violence, and politics. North Korea is one of the worst human rights violators in the world. Christians face persecution and severe punishment for worshiping outside state-controlled churches. Joining me is Tony Perkins, the newly appointed chair of the bipartisan U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. Tony, thank you so much for coming on the show, and congratulations on your appointment. There are, as you know, several state-sanctioned churches in North Korea, but these are just show churches, right?
Yeah, they're nothing more than a facade. Look, North Korea is one of the worst countries in the world when it comes to religious freedom. I mean, look, repressive governments hate religious freedom. They're fearful of their people having the ability to express their faith because there is no moral foundation for a repressive government, and so they're very concerned about religious freedom. And the tyranny, the repression that we see in North Korea is, again, it's unparalleled.
What price does a North Korean pay for following Jesus Christ?
Well, we know that there are camps, concentration camps, if you will, in North Korea, where political prisoners, Christians, we know, best estimates, a very closed country, but maybe 50,000 of them are Christians. They are singled out for harsh treatment, for torture, forced hard labor. And there is in North Korea, it's more of a worship of the ruling family. And so no religion of any sort is tolerated. And it's a very repressive regime. And hopeful that the engagement by this administration, which is all in when it comes to religious freedom around the globe, that by engaging in these conversations and negotiations with North Korea, that possibly the door might be opened. The North Korean people clearly have been locked away from the rest of the world, but if they get a glimpse of what true freedom is like, maybe we could see freedom coming to North Korea in the future.
Yeah, Tony, talk to that very specific point. As you know, talks between our two countries have so far focused on trade and denuclearization. Why isn't human rights and religious freedom a part of those discussions?
Well, I actually think they have been. It's not been publicized much, but I know that in the first meeting the president had, that those issues did come up. Obviously, at the top is the denuclearization of the peninsula. That's the top priority. But those other issues have factored in to the conversation.
As I mentioned, you are the new chair of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. Tony, what's going to be your focus during your tenure?
Well, there is a lot happening around the world. We're seeing unprecedented levels of persecution of people of faith, Christians being probably the largest religious group that is being persecuted. But, we look at China. We have the Uyghur Muslims that are being put into concentration camps, somewhere between 800,000 to 2 million of them. We see the Middle East being very unsettled right now. But here's the good news, George. What we're seeing happen, because of the focus of this administration, many countries are paying attention now to religious freedom, or at least the freedom of worship in their country. So I'm engaging with leaders at the highest levels all around the world, in moving them forward toward recognizing that fundamental human right of religious freedom, meaning the ability to worship as you please, not to worship, to change your religion. That's a fundamental right of every human being. And this administration, this commission is advancing that around the world.
Are there any areas of the world that you hope during your time as chair to draw attention to?
I do. I think there's great promise in Egypt right now. I think President El-Sisi, I've met with him twice. He's certainly trying to move his country. It's somewhat outside of Cairo, it's very difficult. There are threats to people of faith there. We're working with the State Department to provide more security to places of worship. But also, I'm very concerned about what's happening in Nigeria. That country, I think, could be another Rwanda, where you have genocide, where you have right now violence taking place between Muslims and Christians. And in fact, I've adopted as a prisoner of conscience Leah Sarabu, who was a 15-year-old girl who was kidnapped by Boko Haram and being held as a prisoner. And so I hope to bring greater attention to what's happening in Nigeria as well.
Okay, terrific. We'll have to leave it there. Tony, thank you so much, and congratulations on the new position.
Thank you very much.
You're most welcome. Well, folks, that is it for today's edition of World Beat. Until next time, goodbye, and God bless you.
After the break, a remarkable rescue caught on an officer's body cam footage is going viral. We'll bring you that story. Stay tuned.
Prophecy thousands of years old,
We were called to be a light to the world.
being fulfilled today. Discover how. Get to life. Call 1-800-700-7000.
We consider it our duty to reach out and help others around the world.
For a gift of $10 or more, you can own the acclaimed CBN documentary To Life. Just call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to CBN.com.
To treat a human, no matter what he is, which religious he have, which color he is. This is what I'm doing.
See how the people of Israel are fulfilling prophecy
History is being written, and I want to be a part of it.
by sharing their knowledge
In Africa, in Asia, in South America, in East Europe.
and their love.
This is how we work. This is us.
Get to life. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to CBN.com.
Get Protect Your Sleep and discover how to improve the quality of your life. A free DVD or booklet from the Christian Broadcasting Network.
If you're not a great sleeper, you can do things to make yourself a great sleeper. If you're already a pretty good sleeper, you can enhance your sleep and be even better.
5 leading experts help remove the obstacles between you and restorative sleep.
When you don't get a restful night's sleep, you wake up with an accumulation of stress.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to CBN.com to get your free DVD or booklet today.
Everything you do better with a good night's sleep.
You'll discover how food affects your sleep, how to put insomnia to rest, explore effective remedies for sleep apnea, and much more in Protect Your Sleep. Wake up to your best life and get Protect Your Sleep today. Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to CBN.com to get your free DVD or booklet.
Well, check this story out. A police officer in Georgia is being hailed a hero after rescuing a newborn baby off the side of the road. Body cam footage shows the officer discovering the baby girl tied up in a plastic bag, and she was crying. The officer told a local news station, WSB-TV, that his fatherly instincts took over and he did what any father would do. ABC6, another local TV station, reported the family who alerted police say they were led to the child through an act of God. The baby, named India, was immediately taken to the hospital, and officials say so far is doing well. Praise the Lord. Wow, that's exciting. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of Newswatch. You can find more on the issues you care about most at CBNNews.com. You can also watch CBN News programs anytime on our CBN News channel.